and welcome to our third edition of Leading with Influence webinar. Today we'll focus on the two topics, what it means to lead with influence, and then also how to build influence within ourselves. I have a pleasure to have two fantastic guests today. We have Tessa Schwartz, partner at Morrison Foerster, and also Hubert Joly, the currently professor at the Harvard Business School and also a former chairman and CEO of Best Buy. So welcome, everyone. Tessa, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Thanks, Alex. Thank you for having me. I am one of the managing partners at Morrison Foerster. I've been in that role for about 5 years. I'm also a technology transactions lawyer, so I'm in the trenches leading teams. And I thought about today and I thought, well, I'm not a CEO and we have much to learn from everyone here. So I'm excited to hear what Hubert has to say.
Thank you. Hubert, I heard something about you, and that was that people thought that you were crazy and suicidal for taking the job as Best Buy of CEO. How would you introduce yourself? And then, of course, the article said that then you ushered the business to its turnaround. Tell us a few words about yourself.
So I'll let you decide whether I'm crazy. I'm certainly not suicidal. Leading Best Buy has been one of the highlights of my personal and professional life. It gave me the opportunity to learn so much and in many ways conclude that from a leadership standpoint, so much of what I learned at business school or at McKinsey when I was a consultant there, or in my early years as an executive is either wrong, dated, or incomplete, and that we really need to fundamentally rethink why we work, the purpose of companies, and how we lead, which is what we're going to talk about. And as I've now passed the baton of CEO of Best Buy to a wonderful woman, Corey Barry, I'm focusing my life on giving back and adding my voice and my energy to this refoundation of business around purpose and humanity, which is why I'm teaching. This is why I wrote this book, The Heart of Business. That's why I'm coaching and mentoring CEOs and executives, and that's what I'm doing.
That's wonderful. And may I ask you, as a senior lecturer at a Harvard Business School, what advice do you give to your students that you haven't had as you were growing up within yourself as a leader?
Well, first, I would say, Alex, and again, thank you for this opportunity to have this conversation. I think it's wonderful that we talk about this, and congratulations for your research on the topic. The students I have, whether they're in the MBA program or in executive education, they're wonderful leaders. They're all trying to live a great life and find meaning in their lives. And so what I encourage them to do, key advice, is be aware of what drives you. Be aware of who you are and who you want to be. So, for example, if you feel at points in your career that you're driven by either power, fame, glory, or money, then say time out. This is the time to slow down and be clear about what drives you, right? Spend time looking for your purpose in life. How do you want to be remembered? And certainly, with the crisis, the multifaceted crisis we're going through, I see a lot of great CEOs and leaders pausing and say, once this is over, when I pass the baton, how do I want to be remembered? And so spending time on this journey and continuously checking for that, I think is something we talk about.
Thank you. So thank you everyone who's joining us. We have got 160 people right now with us, and I can see the number is growing. The numbers are growing. So it's wonderful to have you here. A few words about what we're trying to achieve through this series of webinars. You might remember, if you joined us for the first or the second one, we talked about Leading with Influence report based on research which has been initiated in collaboration with Morrison Foerster and global leaders in law. We specifically looked, what does exceptional leader of tomorrow looks like? And then practically, what behaviors does that person need to express and inspire in other people to be worthy of such a great title of being an exceptional leader? Leadership isn't an easy task. It's a lifelong learning, I think, process. My experiences that I myself bring, in addition to Tessa's and Hubert's to the session, is I was a former marketing director for Walt Disney. I was launching international channels in quite unusual certain markets where we had to really influence all our stakeholders and influencers to enable our brand to be accepted and really well embedded in the cultural requirements of the regions we were launching. My passion were people. So as there was a one point in my career when I thought, similarly to yours, Hubert, when we talk about later about your switch and pivot, I decided I really loved enabling people to be best people they can be. So I switched my career and moved to executive coaching, facilitation, and now lead a consultancy, Lazarus and Maverick, where our purpose, and it's the filter that I have recently refined with a mutual colleague of ours, Hubert, called Sarah MacArthur, an author of a book called Work is Love Made Visible. Talking with Sarah, I have finalized my tagline, which is improving lives through leadership. So that's, I'm bringing those two lenses into this session today. And I just wanted to go over to you, Tessa, because I found your, I know that our bio isn't really just speaking for the human we are. Nevertheless, it's inspiring, it's impressive. I know that you are, you're not just a professional, you're a busy parent, and you give your time and your expertise as well to different pro bono causes. I just wanted to ask you what prompts you, or what is your rationale and motivation to give your time to companies and causes outside of the work that you do?
Yeah, I think there is so much to be said about kind of living life through values, and it sounds lofty. You know, all law firms have a dedication to pro bono, and Morrison Foerster particularly, but I think part of it is just that feeling of engagement. And so, you know, one of the examples that I was thinking about when you asked this question is when we had all of the turmoil, you know, the racial justice riots and all of that turmoil, and we were thinking about how we as an organization were going to reflect that and address that. We had this incredible opportunity to also represent a nonprofit. Actually, the woman who started it is Ava DuVernay, who's an exceptional director, and but has an organization that's focused on bringing to light the voices of those who have experienced racial injustice, but also the diverse experience of their lives, and creating narratives by, you know, through film and all sorts of the arts. And that's a different way to express, I think, what a lot of us feel, which is that we want a way to make a difference, but we're never quite sure how we can make an impact. So these are small ways that we as leaders show, not just, you know, to our organizations, but to the people on our teams, what matters to us. So to be honest, a lot of these pro bono efforts I do to support the associates who want to be engaged. Sometimes I don't even know about the organization. So
right.
It's doing things that feel engaged, but with the people that are engaging.
Mm-hmm. So it's based on the relationship, and it's based on giving back to a particular person, and obviously you know that they are a force for good, so you support those who are agents for good as well.
Support those who are agents for good, but also support those who are engaging in really robust ways, because we can't all be the ones who are on the edge. We're not always the ones standing up. We were chatting before this about the poet, the poet laureate. She's the first junior poet, I don't know what they call youth poet. She was incredible at the inauguration. We can't all be her. I mean, I and Hubert would like to be her when we grow up. So we do our best to support people who can be that voice.
Wonderful. And Hubert, thank you so much, Tessa. Hubert, what's the one cause that you would support wholeheartedly outside? And I know I'm making it hard for you both because I say one cause, but what one cause would you support, you know, without thinking, the blink of an eye, outside of your work frame?
There's two causes we're supporting with my foundation. One is in the US around providing opportunities to disadvantaged teenagers. I mean, it's under the umbrella of addressing issues of inequality across race in particular and social groups. So the specific initiatives which I studied when I was at Best Buy, but that I'm now personally funding, is the Best Buy Teen Tech Centers. And our goal is to have 100 of those throughout the country, throughout the US in the next few years. And they're targeting disadvantaged teenagers, and they're giving them access to technology skills, which are so important today, and then a bridge to higher education and then a job. And so we started this at Best Buy with the support of the world's foremost tech companies with which Best Buy, of course, interacts. And there's a specific project that we're looking at with New York Public Library here in New York City, where I live now, where they're very excited about the same mission. So really helping those that are these obstacles in their life and that want to do well. And when I see these kids, I'm so inspired by the possibilities of unlocking their potential. And then the second cause, which is in France, is 2 or 3 years ago with my foundation, we've endowed a chair at HEC Paris, which is the French business school, a chair on purposeful leadership, with the view that business education, I don't know about legal education, but business education is way too focused on learning techniques like marketing and finance. And when I see, great leaders today, they're not the best leaders because they're the best at spelling out the 4 Ps of marketing, or they're not the best at calculating a net present value. They're able to lead from a place of purpose and humanity and create an environment in which others can be successful. And what I call unleashing human magic, which sounds soft, but I actually believe this is hard, both being difficult to do, and this is something that can be learned. And so having business education pivot towards this sense of purpose and humanity is, I think, feels to me that this is a big leverage point, because leaders can then influence many others. So these are the 2 areas. There's a few others, but these are the 2 areas where we're the most engaged.
And Hubert, while we have you on camera and in focus and the golden spotlight, you wrote a book called The Heart of Business: Leadership Principles for the Next Era of Capitalism. Could you tell us a bit more about the why of the book?
So this is a book that I've wanted to buy, and I can actually do an infomercial, right? This is what it looks like. You can pre-order it now on Amazon and other great places. Don't you love the design that HBR did? It's a book that I've wanted to write for a long time, but frankly, when you're a CEO, it's hard to do. So
yeah,
having passed the baton, I feel I could do it. This is, in a sense, this is the secret sauce behind the resurgence of Best Buy, which I think is worth telling. But this is not just that. This is a vision, a philosophy around purposeful leadership that invites us to rethink why we work. Is it a curse, a punishment, or something you do so that you can do something else? Or is that part of our quest for meaning as individuals? To rethink about business, right? And in there we assert that the purpose of business is not to make money. And I've shared that with our investors at Best Buy. It's an outcome, it's an imperative, but the purpose is to serve the common good and mobilize everybody at the company, align everybody at the company around that noble purpose and addressing all of the key stakeholders. And it's everything I've learned about how to unleash human magic and lead from this place of purpose and humanity. And the reason why I wanted to write the book, I think today, Alex, you would probably agree that most people want to do this. They want to lead, they want to live a good life. They want to make a positive difference in the world. What I've found is that doing it is actually hard. And so this book is a guide, is a playbook on how to do this. So for every leader who aspires to let go of the old ways of the past and make business a force for good and make a positive difference through business activities, this is a playbook on how to do this. And I'm excited because I feel it can make a difference. I also create a curriculum at HBS on the basis of the book, again, to help others who are on that journey. And there's many of us on that journey, so we can continue to learn on that journey. So that's the why of the book.
I certainly found it really informative, and I found it not just inspiring, but also informative. I found it to be a book that I could give and hand it to a cynic, because in my line of work, I'm disarming limiting beliefs, and I'm getting people to see a future, a reality and a future through a new lens. And it's that resistance to see things in a new way that quite often is the topic of coaching. It's a great book, Hubert. So really congratulations on finding the time to put pen to paper and share your wisdom.
Thank you.
So for those of us who joined us now, just to remind you, this is our third webinar, which we're running in collaboration with Global Leaders in Law. It's been inspired by a research that we have done on how to lead with influence. Such a simple question, yet such complex answer really in the current tumultuous times. The research will be released by Morrison Foerster and Global Leaders, I believe, soon. So Global Leaders in Law will be in touch with you, and there will be, I'm sure, further information about that. We have found an answer, and we have identified 6 key competencies of future leaders that would inspire positive change. But I first just wanted to ask our 2 wonderful guests what they think about the topic. And I think the time is really good. I mean, we've planned this webinar for January. I think I can still say to everyone, Happy New Year. But as we're starting this year, it's usually time for reflection. This year, however, it's harder to stop and pause and reflect, especially as we are still running on the back of the previous year that seems to have been a rehearsal for 2021. However, moving forward, putting ourselves in the position of starting afresh, I'd like us to reflect about what does it mean to lead with influence in 2021? Very open question. Let's just see what comes up. Tessa, question. I just repeat that. So what does it mean to lead with influence 2021 and beyond?
Yeah, I was trying to think about what it means to lead with influence. And I guess the first question you might ask is to lead whom and to what end? Sometimes you have a clear end in line. And I know that you described some organizations you're involved in and you're trying to meet certain goals. But sometimes I think leading with influence is about having values, reflecting those values in the organization and having them kind of permeate all the aspects of everything you do. So it's thinking about your priorities through the lens of what those values are. And we talk a lot about community these days, and there's the outside has become part of companies. So the political has been expressed by leaders of corporations, and it is impossible, and nor should we, ignore important issues like racial injustice and the Me Too movement and all of these kinds of things. And those are in a way external, but really they're internal. They're internal to all of our organizations, because I think that this is a generation, and the generation that comes after us even more so, that is really driven by values and driven by what inspires them and engages them. And, you know, in particular in our business, we're a people business. It's about the talent. We want to attract the best talent to do the best and most interesting work for our clients. And in order to get those people, they need to be engaged. So you take that concept of driving choices by values, and it makes perfect sense to consider that if you want to draw those who are going to be engaged in the highest and the best, they too will share those views. And we don't always share all the same values, though, Alex, and that's part of it, is trying to find the commonality. So, you know, maybe we'll talk a little bit later about, you know, diversity or some of the other values I think that we can all say we share, but sorting out what those values are and articulating them, I think that is the beginning of what exceptional leadership is about.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's very inspiring. I've had this exercise done with, as I mentioned, a colleague, Sarah MacArthur, a couple of months ago, where just in the midst of the pandemic and, you know, homeschooling, I just couldn't see anything. I just lost clarity. And I was speaking to Sarah about some of our thought leadership, and she just asked me, what's that filter? Everything that you do. Of course, we on our website, and then we do live those values of our strapline, which we say we transform teams and leaders through a choice of focus on choice, character, and connection. We want to add joy, improve performance, and change the society. So I said, that's a little too long. Just give me one liner of what exactly it is that you do. So that's where we've come up with the true North Stars is improving lives through better leadership. And my 3 words are very close to my heart would be dialogue, creativity, and proactivity. And the dialogue for me is that diversity that you're talking about and other values. And I agree with you, that's where incredible clarity just ensues. And sometimes we need to refresh those values, because what our values might have been 5 years ago, we need to do, you know, a bit of like an MOT on a car. We do that every year. So values exercise is definitely very powerful. Thank you. Hubert, what's about you? What does it mean to lead with influence?
Well, first,
Now
Alex,
and beyond.
yes, Alex, I think your work is so timely, because it's clear to everyone that the old ways of leading are not working. The old model of you take a bunch of smart people, you ask them to create a smart strategy, a smart implementation plan, communicate it, put incentives in place, and hope that things are going to happen. That just doesn't work anymore. People don't like to be told what to do. So the top-down model of leadership simply doesn't work. Intrinsic motivation is really what works. And so I think, Tessa, you talk about values, that's critical. Let's try to make it very concrete. During the crisis that we're living, I saw so many great examples of very inspiring leadership. So CEOs, let's say in retail, which is an industry I know a little bit, Corey Barry, my successor at Best Buy, during the COVID crisis, the first priority was the safety of the employees and of the customers, not profits, really taking care of them. The purpose of the company, are you fulfilling an important need for people around you? And then how do you create the environment for people to be able to navigate through this, which has an immense focus on the humanity, right? We talk about, you know, work from home, work-life balance. We're now looking for the whole person. Communication has become critical. Helping people deal with anxiety. 20%, in normal times, 20% of a group of people suffer some kind of mental illness. During the crisis, you know, anxiety levels are even higher. So taking care of, so leading with purpose and humanity, I think has been very inspirational and impactful. Let me give you a few more examples of what it looks like in practice. A store general manager at Best Buy in Boston, the key question that he in this case asked the 100 and so associates in the store is, what is your dream? At Best Buy or outside of Best Buy, what is your dream? Okay, write it down in the break room. My goal as the leader of the store is to help you achieve your dream, right? That's very different from, oh, let's look at your performance yesterday. How come you did not achieve your goals? Or Cami Scarlett, the head of HR at Best Buy. One day she disclosed to everyone that for years she'd been suffering from depression. What leader does this, right? You know, admit a weakness. This had a profound impact on the company, because as a leader, it's okay to be vulnerable. And so she made everybody feel at the company that it was okay to have issues and problems, that we could talk about it. Another example that will be, I think, relevant to the legal profession that's represented on this call. So every company has a code of ethics. I don't know about your company's code of ethics, but at Best Buy, it was a very good list of all of the things that could lead you to go to jail. So these are all of the things you should not do. In the last 2 or 3 years, we rewrote it completely with a focus on purpose and values, sharing the intent of what we're trying to accomplish when dealing with customers, with vendors, with employees, with shareholders. That's the intent. These are the principles, the values. That's our purpose. And that's how, you know, because ethics is how you behave when nobody's watching, right? That's the ideal, you know, this is what we look like when we are at our best. And then, of course, there was a reminder of these are the legal aspects, the legal requirements, and make sure you go through this. But it started with a sense of why are we here and how do we want to show up? And I think that, you know, because of course, as a CEO, I've worked very closely with our legal team at Best Buy or in my previous jobs, you know, and our partnership has evolved from, Hubert, this is the risks that this deal or this transaction or this policy could have, to this is what we're trying to accomplish. Let's work together to orient everything we do with around the intent, and then we'll make sure that we minimize the risk of going to jail, but we don't start with that. And it's been a wonderful transformation, and it was made possible because we were all aligned around our purpose as a company, which our purpose at Best Buy is not to be a retailer, it's not to sell you a TV, it's to enrich lives through technology by addressing key human needs. And we put our humanity at the center of that. That's the unleash.
What so much of what you say, sorry, Alex, I was just gonna say, it really resonates, because I feel like this experience of remote working and focus on the whole of the person, it's been somewhat transformational. At least it has for our leadership team. I mean, the first thing is that the conversations we have really have, because we are so focused on how everybody's doing, how we are able to make sure that everyone is working toward their goals, toward joint goals, to think about their mental health, to think about their physical safety. It has forced the conversation to be about the whole person. And I think there's a lot about the crisis and the crises we faced in the last year that in a way I think is going to leave behind a really positive legacy, kind of reimagining what it means to be part of a team, and what it means to be an employee versus a leader. And I think breaking down a lot of that has been pretty useful. This is just my own experience, which is that we have met as a leadership team every day, right? We get together every day. And at the beginning, we talked about safety first and foremost and health every day. But over time, it really has become what you describe, Hubert. It's been about the whole of the person and what is sort of motivating people, which has become so important because we're not in person to kind of create this sense of a story and a narrative for people. We have to do it in this very remote way, and it requires getting to know people in a very different way. It's not chit chat around the cooler. So I think thinking about, as a leader, for all of you out there, what are the things that you didn't do before you saw a crisis, and how can you kind of capture the best of the crisis? And I don't mean that we want to see a crisis every day. We don't. But what did you do that you were really proud of in that moment? And how could you kind of do that again, but not in reaction to a crisis, but because it's now a best practice? That inspires me today.
And if I may, Alex and Tessa, to build on this, I think for me, this is the shift from the leader as the superhero who's got all of the answers to the leader who is there to create an environment in which others can give their best and be, blossom and be successful. So another story. I once ran into a young associate in one of our stores. He told me that his life had been transformed the day that a manager recognized him, knew who he was, and took an interest in them. And my compatriot René Descartes, the philosopher, had this idea that I think, therefore I am. So the legal profession knows Latin, so I'll do cogito ergo sum. I think this is gone. It is I am seen, therefore I am. Ego videor ergo sum. And as leaders, if we can create this environment where everybody on the team feels they exist, they belong, and they can be the best version of themselves, making sure that we recognize when one of our team members, self-included, are going through a difficult patch, and then reaching out and making sure that we connect at a very personal level. I think for me, that's one of the ingredients of magic that we can make happen, and of this inspiring leadership, or leadership by influence that you talk about, Alex. So very profound. There's no going back, to your point, Tessa.
So true. There's no going back. There's also this idea of involvement that you're describing, and the feeling of being seen and heard. Before we hopped on, there was a discussion about a wedding, an online wedding. So congratulations to those who we're at the online wedding. And it's this idea of being in the front row to things. I had a less happy occasion this weekend. I was at an online funeral, actually. It was a memorial service for somebody who passed from COVID. But we were all front row, and I was thinking about that experience. Normally you're in the back, and there's kind of a stage and a platform where somebody's getting married, or there's a speaker, something's happening out there. And you're reacting to it, and if you choose to, cry with joy or happiness, nobody's really watching you. What was really different about this experience was that we were all on display. Everybody had their square, and they were present in a way that isn't typical, right? And in a way, this kind of remote experience has created a way for our teams to be present and have a voice that they maybe didn't have, because you're actually looking at somebody. They're not waiting to be called on, or maybe somebody will glance their way. And that is, I think, somewhat changes the way you think about your team and who you're engaging with. Mm-hmm. And actually, it's really very helpful for diversity. So I hope we get to that point, because it does. You see the people, and you can kind of appreciate that you need to be sort of engaging everybody's viewpoint.
Thank you. I've noted the question, Tessa, so we'll come back to diversity just in a moment. I agree, it's a really important topic right now. I just wanted to ask you a question, speaking on behalf of people who might be listening in and dialing in and thinking, it sounds all great, and talking about the heart of the business and Hubert's book and your work of unleashing the human magic, listening to you, Tessa, thinking, gosh, I'd like to live my purpose, love to do this every day. But thinking on behalf of people who might right now be in an environment just doesn't unleash them, an environment that actually disinspires them, and whatever the word is, and trims their sense of identity, the sense of creativity, because I do come across those people quite a lot. Sometimes from incredible organizations, those voices will gently edge forward and say, but what do? I am micromanaged. My boss is of a different paradigm and thinking, etc. I just want to ask you, Hubert, what advice would you give to somebody who is inspired already by our conversation, would like to step forward and lead with influence, yet he or she is in an environment that doesn't enable them to do that? And they are not in a position quite yet to change things and step out of that system. What advice would you give them?
I think, Alex, we've all been, certainly I have been in situations where I was not inspired. I mean, I remember when I was a 16-year-old boy, working during the summer in a French hypermarket to make a buck or two to buy a bicyclette, a bike. That was not an inspiring environment. Or later on, in my first job after McKinsey, I was at a major multinational company that will remain nameless for a second, where the only thing that the CEO cared about was profits. So there's environments where it's hard. So I think as leaders, we have three options. One is we can decide to lead how we think it's appropriate to lead, and assume that if we're going to be here, it might as well be who we want to be. And by the way, all of the soft stuff I talk about doesn't mean that performance is not important. That I would highlight that the share price of Best Buy has gone from $11, I think, in the fall of 2012 to $115 now. So the magic of this is that you can actually create amazing, irrationally good outcomes by this focus on unleashing human magic. So, lead the way you think is appropriate. If you feel your boss is an impediment or is, has a different view, I would encourage transparency and say, look, it's interesting, we seem to have different views. These are my views. I'd love to have your views, and, have the conversation and share, be vulnerable and say, look, that's how. And then if you don't feel safe, if you feel the environment is not safe, I mean, there's been a situation, which is the one I described, where the sole focus on the company was on profit, that and everything was subservient to this. I just left. And now that's not always possible, because, sometimes the job market is a constraint, and we need to earn a living for our families and so forth. I was fortunate enough to be able to do this, but I would, if possible, that'd be option one, option two, option three as a last resort, but don't rule it out, because you're going to be so miserable. And hopefully, you can, find a better opportunity for you. And you only have one life, right? So might as well make it count. So these are some of the thoughts for you, Alex.
Thank you. And to all the participants who are listening in, it'll be, one day great to see all of you who are tuning in. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, there's a chat. I think the chat function is working. So please feel free just to say hello, where you coming, where you are listening from. It's always nice to kind of imagine the faces behind just the numbers. If you have any questions, put them in the Q&A as well, and we'll do our best to address them. If you also have ideas of what to do to lead influence, maybe you've done something yourself or with your team across your organization in the culture work, or yourself, or governance, whatever the ideas might have led you to be change for good, please share, and we would love to hear from you as well. Tessa, I know you're really passionate about diversity, so I'd love to hear a little bit more from you about this. And if I might just proceed that by one thought that I had a couple of months ago. I was leading a large workshop with a number of people, where we asked people, what does influence mean? What does it stand for? One word that comes to mind. We created a big word cloud, and I think we had over 200 people or so quite a significant number of people to express themselves and their thoughts about influence. And what really struck me was that the biggest, the fattest word in the word cloud, which obviously indicates that many will have mentioned the same word, was that influence is seniority. Influence is leadership and status, power. And then there were other smaller words, which were wonderful, the ones that we would say everybody. To me, influence equals everybody. To me, influence equals an expected source, right? Could be from anyone, one voice, two voices. And I did think about, and this is one of the questions I will ask, and I have been asking my clients in C-suites, how would your employees answer such a question? Because if your employees are answering this as influence equals seniority, leadership, C-suite, exec suite, you are on the wrong path. Mm-hmm. The leadership is not distributed equally. There's no diversity in that case. Tessa, I'd love to hear your thoughts on diversity and what you wanted to share.
Thanks, Alex. You've described kind of the notion of these different kinds of leadership, right? There's obviously there's like charismatic leadership. We all know that has its good and bads aspects of it, and there can often be kind of a top-down view of things. And I think, to be honest, that it is the involvement of different voices that creates the alternative. So it seems like there's one way to do things, and it's easy to say top down if you are in an echo chamber. And that's been one thing I feel like I've learned a lot in the last few years about, is I'll hear a story or I'll hear about the way it is again and again. And then I will discover that it's actually the same three people having the same conversation, but happen to be vocal enough to express that point of view. Now imagine those same three people or four people, whomever, are the C-suite. And they're just talking to each other and reinforcing all of their perspectives day in and day out. And that moves things in a particular direction, but it also gives a sense that like what we are doing is the right thing to do. And that, of course, it should be top down, because of course it's the right thing. We all agree. Why wouldn't everyone agree? And so it's the creation of diversity of voices. And just my own experience is that women and men approach problems sometimes very differently. Not every man and every woman, but sort of, are you going to take a very collaborative perspective? Are you going to, charge for the hill? What are you going to do about it? So for me, it's that inclusion of different voices, and not just, it's not just gender and racial diversity, but also generational diversity, which I think is critical for good leadership, is to hear the voices of those who are looking forward and see like this is the beginning of their career versus the middle of their career or the end of their career. So the leadership itself requires a team. I mean, no one person. I'm sure you have many skills and you were inspirational to your team, but you had a team, and if your team reflects different voices and perspectives, then what happens is that is a way to be authentic and connect with different people in your organization who feel represented. So that is not about sort of diversity by the numbers, but it's about diversity of viewpoints. And we see this so for example, the chair of our comp committee is a woman. I think it has changed the way that people have conversations in the room. And I thought that was an extremely important decision to make as an institution, because, a person who sees things from different ways can help move the conversation in different ways. That has been important. Putting people into positions, not just based on what they've shown today, but what they can do in the future. So important.
So Tessa, I just wanted to tell you both, just in the spirit of keeping to time, that we have one question from a Q&A, so I'll bring that up in a moment. I'm so sorry, Hubert. But Tessa, I have got 2 quotes already that I could just put it on the Instagram if I were active on Instagram. And that would be Tessa Schwartz, who says, involvement of different voices that creates influence. I love that. And the second one, leadership requires a team. Absolutely, leadership is not a singular game. It is a very much of a collective experience. Love that. Let's have a look at the voice. We had a Q&A, and Beth Korn, thank you for greetings from New York. Oh, wonderful. I really miss New York. Nice to have you here, Beth. Let's have a look. So question that we have is, how would you approach toxic leadership when management gains the trust of its associates to protect and care for the team? How do you combat the hostility from senior leadership members?
So there's
I might put that question in a chat just in case if you're the visual like me, you might like to see that. I'll put it in a chat. There we go. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a legal audience. So I think certainly in the US, but I think the same absolutely exists around the world. We have since Sarbanes-Oxley this process around hotlines, anonymous employee hotline. You're able to escalate in an anonymous fashion, and this then, if the accusations pertain to officers of the company or member of the executive teams or board members, then this triggers an investigation by the audit committee and oftentimes with the legal firm, right, to go through that process. So that's I love that because it creates, in environments that are not safe, where you feel that speaking up is not possible, then it's a good backdrop that will have consequences. I can share that with you as a CEO and as a board member of several companies. It can make a difference. Now, before you go there, sometimes you can actually have the conversation and say, okay, so because there's so many ways now in good companies, tracking and employee engagement scores. This will, the scores will be shared within the team, and then this creates conversation. And then, so certainly our role as leaders is to make sure that there's no room for toxic management, and that it can be spotted, it can be addressed in a timely fashion. So again, our role as leaders to create an environment where people can flourish, which means no toxic environment, no tolerance for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think strength in numbers is like the answer to most things. There's leadership in a room and there's leadership out of the room where the decisions are being made. And if there is enough of those coming together and in sort of bringing to light, as you describe, the issues and offering an alternative, and it becomes a chorus, not just a sole voice. And again, it becomes not just an echo chamber, but you're an opera. And at some point, change, it's hard to resist that kind of change when everybody is saying, we would like to do something and this is how we would like to do it differently. And there's, you do have to deal with the reality that sometimes there are things that are just wrong. They are either, immoral or they are unethical or whatnot. And those things you swiftly reject as an entity and an institution and say no to that. We won't tolerate it. But I think there are way more subtle ways that people can be toxic. And the question is, do you want to take them head on, or do you want to try alternatives to show other ways that we can, I don't know, provide an alternative, provide a recommendation, show why the other way is better. To be honest, every time everyone says we don't want to do it this way, I'm always like, well, how would you like to do it? So to answer that question, I think it's often behind the scenes, not just on the hotline.
Yeah, and it requires time. Thanks, Tessa. I'm really great in practical tips as well on how to do this. I observe this quite a lot in different coaching assignments and teams we work with. There might be that toxicity that exists at a high level. And I view this as a project. It requires time. It requires, first of all, building your inner self-confidence to want to be the force of good and change. And as Tessa said, there is leadership in the room, there's leadership outside the room. So creating a strong network of people who champion the same viewpoint as you. But then obviously really tactfully and carefully finding a way to influence the person who might have different views, and try slowly to get them onto your agenda, but also find a compromise in the language. So it's not just kind of, I'm pushing my views on you and that's how it has to be done. When people are tired, and we've got somebody here who talks about people suffering from burnout at the moment, I'll ask this question in a plenary as well. But there's one of my clients quite a while ago said, all I get is toxic leader above me, and yet I have got a team of a number of 100 people with my direct reports that I have to lead. And the question for me was, what do you want to leave behind? What kind of leadership legacy do you want to create? And you just have to create that cutoff point and be really careful what filters down into your team and what behaviors you allow to be tolerated and what behaviors you don't allow to be tolerated. Because unfortunately, when there are undesired behaviors coming from the top, it almost sends a message that it's allowed. So this person done a lot of work on it in a culture of his division, and took a lot of joy from that peer relationships and ground up culture and spirit that he had created, which was quite fantastic. And then slowly over a period of time, the senior leadership had seen what he's done, the result of that phenomenal, almost employee movement to go to from good to great and all those expressions we know. And that was an important influencing piece in his hand to say, this is how we can do things. There's no threat to change. We can do it slowly, but this is the influence. So I do say to clients, let's see this as a goal. Almost tell me when it's on a scale of 1 to 10, when you feel you've achieved your goal, what's happening, what you say to yourself, what other people say to you, and then let's work backwards to see how long it's going to take you, who you need in your camp, and what messages you're going to be putting out there. We have one more question, and thank you for answering. Thank you for sending us your questions. We have Wilhelmine, apologies if I haven't pronounced your name correctly, Van Lokeren. I wonder where you're dialing from. But we have, you say to us, currently a lot of employees are suffering from a burnout or nearly close to its due to the circumstances. Do you have any advice for managers, leaders to help avoid this? Very timely question, very real question, because when people are not at the best, it triggers them into fight, flight, freeze. And unfortunately, when they're not at their best, they might not either perform or have the best behaviors. I just put that in the chat, by the way, for you, Tessa and Hubert, this question. And back to the participants, if anyone has ideas and answers to help us answer this question, please feel free to put it in the chat. Hubert, over to you. What advice would you give to managers and leaders to help avoid the burnout?
So two things. One, start with yourself, right? When we were flying, remember when we were told by the steward or the stewardess that if there would be a depression, that we would need to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first so that we can help others. So critical for leaders, for each of us as leaders, to make sure during these challenging times that we take care of ourselves, that we exercise, that we take time between Zoom meetings, that we meditate, that we take care of beloved one and so forth. So take care of ourselves, irrespective of how you do it. Maybe it's with a coach, Alex, right? And then second, watch out for people around you. I think there's a terrible phenomenon taking place today, which is women exiting the workforce in large numbers these days. I think for sure in the US, I'm guessing outside of the US as well. And part of the reason for this is that with this work from home or school closed, still in our society, for the most part, it's women taking care of the children, of feeding. And how do you navigate, in the Zoom world, you have Zoom meetings from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. How do you do this? So create an environment where it's okay to take breaks, where it's okay. So if you need to attend to an aging parent or a child, create the space for this, because we're going to need you for the long term. And then provide tools. So many companies now have wellness programs. I was speaking recently with Ariana Huffington, who's launched this Thrive Global. She's got wonderful tools. So I would encourage everybody to look into this, that help employees at companies take care of themselves. There's dashboards for a board. I think as important as the P&L or the Net Promoter Score on customers or employee engagement is the anxiety level and the level of stress in the workforce. So pivots the mind to, going back to what you were saying, Tessa, take care of the whole person. Be a leader who leads from a place of humanity, leading with all of our body parts. We're trained to lead with our brain. We're whole people. So our brain, our heart, our soul, our guts, our ears, our eyes, our hands, that's what we need. I made the mistake for a long time to be cut off at the head, right? I was using my brain and it was disconnected from the rest. Today's leadership is with all of the body parts.
That absolutely resonates. There is no profession like the legal profession where people are really pushed, I think, beyond their capacity sometimes. We're very client oriented, and if a client needs something, we are there for them, and that can lead to burnout in a pretty serious way. So I think for those of you out there who are clients, it's to have humanity, I think, whether you are asking for somebody to do something, to take into account that they do have all of these stresses. It kind of forcing also, I have a wonderful member of our team who every year in November, he's exhausted, he's done. And he's such a talented guy. And every year we say, you're going on a holiday, you're going to go, and we're not going to be in touch with you, and have a great time, and we will cover for you. And every year he says, there's no way. And the answer is, every year, everyone does this, and it shouldn't be once a year. I mean, that's some crazy right there. Other suggestions, do as we did. We got a giant golden doodle, and he's a therapy dog. So we literally, I will go and hug the dog and come back to work. That works, that's great. But also variety in communications. I don't know about you all, but I wake up, sometimes I'm on Zooms being on display with bad hairdos and sometimes better hairdos, but literally all day long from 7:30 or 8 in the morning until whatever time. And I think sometimes people just don't want to be seen all the time. They want to kind of be able to process information in their own way and take notes in their own way. So don't kind of force people to be on all the time. I think that letting people kind of be their authentic self, there's a big debate about that. Do they have to show up to the meeting and be on? I think for whatever reason, sometimes people just don't want to, and I think that's fine. Not great answers, but you got to start with the tiny things that make people feel more comfortable in their skin.
I love your answers. So the just let go of perfection, but also create an environment when people can really just say, hey, I had a really tough day homeschooling my 7-year-old. I want to be able to create an environment where I can say that without no chink of judgment. Oh, is she doing her work okay? Is she capable to do her work today? And if I can't, I also want to be comfortable and feel safe with my team to say, I am behind. because something happened in my home environment, because it wasn't an easy day. And I think what you were saying, Tessa and Hubert, at the beginning, the 2020, if any good came out of it, despite, you know, really tragic circumstances and outcomes, but the one good thing that came out is that we have for the first time completely interwoven professionalism with the ability to be real, to be imperfect, to be you know, hopping over daily obstacles as a partner, parent, daughter, son, etc. And all of those make us stronger. All of those things make us who we are. We cannot separate ourselves anymore. But I love, you know, I really love, obviously I have lots of clients, and as a small business, for us, having clients is our life. You know, it's our lifeblood. This is what we have to do. We don't get a regular salary. And I love the clients who will start a meeting, even a pitch meeting, and they know the names of my kids, or they know where I live, and they say, hey, how are you doing? How was the weekend? I find that incredibly humanizing, incredibly inspiring. And I will go the extra mile for people who will not expect of me to be some kind of a robotic, constantly role modeling, even though that deep down is my aspiration. But I love to be forgiven for being a human, and maybe even patted on my shoulder for being human. So having those leaders, if you are a leader right now and you're listening, as Tessa said, leadership requires a team. As Hubert said in his upcoming book, Heart of the Business, Leadership, Principles for the Next Era of Capitalism. And by the way, Abigail, can I ask you to put a link, because you can pre-order the book. But as Hubert said, it's about unleashing the human magic. The kind of, you know, reward, carrot and stick does not work for our internal intrinsic motivation. So lots of great tips here. We've got 3 minutes until the end. If there's any other question that anybody would like to ask us, please put it in the Q&A right now. But I'd like to lead us slowly to the end of this session. And really thank you, Tessa, for coming and speaking to us, because you are a great source of ideas in the legal profession. Your examples of anything from, you know, how you perceive leadership, how you yourself lead your team, your passion for diversity, giving back. Love what you said about it is all about the different voices in the room that create that influence. Really love that, and plenty of other things. Hubert, your journey as a which magazine it was? Yes, that was the CNBC, who said you were either crazy or suicidal for taking the job of CEO, and then you ushered in its turnaround. What an incredible story to hear it from you, and what an honor to have it in a session from a leader who said, I did it to unleash a human magic. And just like that associate in Boston, the question is to ask the employees, what's your dream? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to make it happen. Mm-hmm. When you say that, I just want to give you a virtual hug. And times have changed, guys. We are here, you know, on Zoom. And it does give us it does create incredible opportunities. The new so-called normal does create opportunities. So I hope that each one of you are able to tap into the opportunities, the magic of possibility. I was saying to Huber's congratulations again, got married last year, and it was my first virtual wedding. I was so excited, you know, I had a front seat, but things have changed. And last year was tough. Things are going to continue to be tough in buckets here and there. There's no doubt about it. But there's so much growth we can experience in times of crisis, in times of hardship. And I think we're all really well placed to be change for good. Take it as a project, build personal influence, and think what you want to influence. Before we go, Tessa, what was your parting message?
My parting message is to consider everyone in your organization. It's not just about the executive team, it's about everybody feeling included. In our organization, there's staff and that are so important to everything we do. I always say to at least the leadership staff that they run the firm, and I do believe that. So when we talk about leadership, just remember that it's everybody. It's not just your small team of executives or managers.
Wonderful. Thank you. Hubert.
Well, I think, Tessa, you've just answered the question that was in the Q&A, which is that. And, you know, a question was a point I was sharing with our officers at Best Buy is be clear about who you serve. And I told them, look, if you're serving yourself or your boss or me as the CEO of the company, I actually told them I have no problem with that. It's okay. The only problem is you cannot work here. You can be promoted to being a Best Buy customer, but you cannot work here. If on the other end, you're here to serve the frontliners, so the staff in, at Best Buy, it's the blue shirts or the Geek Squad agents. These are the people who deliver the service. And so it's not the higher ups, it's whoever is on the front line delivering value. And to the question in the Q&A, yes, employee engagement surveys are really important and should absolutely encompass everybody at the company. And then as a leader, you dissect it, by strata, by gender, by ethnic group, you name it. But so critical, everybody needs to feel that they belong and that they're included. That's how you inspire and unleash.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much for all the participants who are still with us. It's 1 past the hour. You're probably dashing off to another meeting, but you're still with us, which is incredible. And I wanted to say, look, if you enjoyed this conversation, why don't you have one like that with your colleagues, with your peers, with your teams? Ask them, what does it mean to lead with influence? Do we feel we have influence? Do you feel you have influence? These aren't, there aren't right or wrong answers. But as Tessa said, lots of voices in the room. As Hubert said, open these conversations, just be transparent. And as I will say, one of my huge values will be dialogue. Dialogue opens up lots of answers and creates even more exciting questions. That has to be the bedrock of any change, is the dialogue and ability to express yourself through conversations like this, unrushed, unjudgmental, curious, and collaborative. For those of you who are interested in Hubert's upcoming book, I have put a link in the chat. It is already, I think you were able to pre-order on Amazon. I was the lucky one who got the first copy, and I really enjoyed reading it. It was very close to my heart, to what I do and what I set up to do every single day in my professional life. So thank you again, everyone. Look out for that Leading with Influence report. Thank you so much, Tessa. It's such a pleasure to meet you. Thank you, Hubert, and all the best. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us on LinkedIn, everyone. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.